Like, we are in the most insane, unprecedented situation imaginable, where the America's Stupidest Man, a reality TV show host who was like criminally indicted 4 separate times and cited an attack on the Capitol of losers carrying his flag, is like right now on a glide path to the presidency again, which he plans to turn into a light autocracy. So that is happening, and the current person running against him is unable to speak. So like, we're in unprecedented times. Shouldn't we at least consider unprecedented options? Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller. It's a little later because my guest likes to sleep in. It's Wednesday, July the 3rd. I've got the co-author of Democracy or Else, How to Save America in 10 Easy Steps. Hopefully they're easy. He's the princeling of the self-important podcaster class. He's my frenemy turned comrade in arms. He's Crooked Media's own Jon Lovett. What's up, buddy?
Hi, Tim. It's good to see you. Yeah, no, it's 9:30 on the West Coast. I think it's a completely reasonable time to record a podcast. I wanted to be up. I want to walk my dog. I want to read the news. I want to know what's going on in the world, and then I want to talk to you.
It is.
I don't think that's so terrible.
It is not terrible. I'm just the listeners expect 3 o'clock. The listeners in the East expect 3 o'clock. So when it's a little later, they're going to want to know who to blame, and I just want to make sure they know it's you. This is not probably going to be that uplifting of a podcast, as people know. And so I pledge to you that we're going to have a few laughs, and we're going to have a few constructive, optimistic, forward-looking items about the easy steps to save democracy at the end, if you stick around, if you can survive.
And I would say, and Tim, I want to tell you something. I woke up today feeling optimistic.
Great.
Maybe that's, I really
that.
did. I'm going to bring, let's just go. It's going to be at core. Here's what I was feeling going into the debate. I want to, because we're going to get into all of it, but I just want to
let's level
I went
set.
into the,
yeah,
I went into the debate. Look, we're all venting spleen this week. We're all revealing our deepest truths. You know, it's 2 a.m. and everyone has just revealed to each other that they believe that the wedding they're at was heading for divorce. You know, it's just like everybody is just loose. Everything is coming out, right? Mm-hmm. I went into the debate feeling like there were 3 possibilities. Obviously, the one most hoped for was that Joe Biden would have a stellar night, right? That like, they prepped him for this. They wanted this. He is going to do very well against Donald Trump, put a lot of these stories to bed, and the dynamic will shift. The other 2 scenarios, one was obviously what we're currently living in, but what I felt was the most likely scenario was the middling performance. The one where Joe Biden shows up, he is fine. He has some stumbles. It's 2 old men bickering, lands a couple punches. The dynamic doesn't shift. Joe Biden comes out at, what we would hope we could call tied, but is really still behind, with voters having deep concerns about his age, disliking both options, and kind of the slow churn and march towards an uncertain future continues. And at first you're watching this debate and it feels fucking terrible. Like you feel a pit in your stomach. But as it continued, you start to realize that we may not know what's coming next, but the one thing that is for sure is that dynamic, that slow, painful, enervating dynamic, has shifted. And as to much what? as to what?
Has it shifted to what, a funeral, right? March? Has it shifted to, like getting eaten alive from the inside? Or has it shifted to a different, more positive dynamic?
I think what it has done is that it has taken it has flattened the curve of outcomes. Like very good and very bad outcomes both feel more possible than they did going into the debate.
Okay, that's true. I agree with that. Okay.
But the median outcome we were heading towards wasn't pretty, right? The hump of the most likely possibility that we were heading towards felt like an inexorable march to maybe eking it out, but all of us feeling in our bones like this was a campaign that had to change something it didn't have the capacity to change.
Okay, so there you go. So the possible optimism is that there is some type of course change coming. Okay. We'll go through what those different options are. I guess the question is, we don't have a course change now, though. What we have is, in the fallout from the debate last Thursday, you would have thought, both of us have been on campaigns, you've been on more winning ones than me, but you would have thought if you were going to, try to change the dynamic with the current ticket, that something would have been done to try to do that. There was a nice Waffle House hangout after the debate.
Mm-hmm.
There was a pretty good speech the next day that some people that were excited about. And then since then, there's been nothing. Joe, it has been the quietest that these two old men have been in our lives in a half decade, while all of us are drunk at this wedding, to extend your analogy, whispering about things. They have been silent. Joe Biden was out for like 1 minute yesterday, I believe. His schedule today is pretty light. He's got lunch with the vice president. He's got a Medal of Honor deal. He might Zoom with some governors this evening. And so, what is do you think that's just the calm before the change, or what do you see happening right now with the existing Democratic ticket?
So we talked about this yesterday on Pod Save America. I think obviously the polling coming out has made people feel a little bit more willing to come out and say they have deep and abiding concerns about Joe Biden being the nominee. But more than that, the fact that Joe Biden hasn't been out there more is really fueling this at this point, because if that really was one bad debate performance, and obviously I think that everyone says that and they're being a bit glib, they know that the Joe Biden at his best right now is still it comes with a certain amount of risk, but that this debate and the level of bad that we saw was somehow an outlier. Like, if that really were the case, he would be out there right now. He would have immediately done a round of interviews on the Friday. He would have been on the campaign trail on Saturday. Like, where has he been that they're not addressing these concerns? The one thing we heard, like, there's a deeply weird story that comes out over the weekend that he's huddling with family and turning to Hunter Biden, and they're thinking about whether he should do a town hall or a long form interview. Then we find out he hasn't even been calling members of Congress. Then we found out, like, no, he's going to sit down for an interview with George Stephanopoulos on Friday, a week after
for 15
the
minutes,
debate,
I think.
For 15 minutes. It all is really amping up the concern that they don't believe Joe Biden, even at his best, can overcome the Joe Biden at his worst that we saw at the debate. And we needed Joe Biden to do really well at that debate. He had to change the dynamic, and instead it confirmed everyone's worst fears. And, there's a story out today that he's, talking to people about how bad the performance was, that he's pretty clear out about it. But then there's this strange summary of the call where apparently, according to the Times, Joe Biden told someone he's apparently close with, but not so close with that they wouldn't go talk to the Times, that he understands that if he has another moment or two, like what happened in the debate, it's over. And it's like, I'm sorry, was that debate strike one? Are we calling that like, what are we talking about here?
Okay, that's a good question, and kind of leads into another one of the things I wanted to hash out with you as a charter Democrat, because some people have been telling me that my Republican side has been showing. But I do want to just throw out one more thing. You mentioned some of these New York Times leaks in the polls. I also want to mention, by the time this is out, there'll be a new New York Times Siena poll out. The last one before the debate had Joe Biden losing by 3 among likely voters, by 6 among registered voters. A memo sent out by the campaign today pre-butted this poll, saying that it will be significantly worse than that. it's hard to imagine how much worse it could be. The texts I've been getting range from everything from he's losing by 8 to he's losing by 10 to Donald Trump will be king forever. So you'll know what the poll says by the time it's out, but we know it's not going to be good. There have also been the other leaks, not just his friend, about how he was taking naps during prep, and Hunter isn't just at the photo shoot at the family, but Hunter's in the White House now, and so that it shows that there's some people around him that are concerned who aren't speaking out. And so my question to you is: there is a school of thought that says Joe Biden is the president. This is Joe Biden's decision. Joe Biden's been nominated by the voters, and so until Joe Biden says anything, people like us shouldn't. And I'll put a finer point on it. Here's the chief strategist of George W. Bush's 2004 campaign, Matt Dowd. He says, I would ask pundits who are anti-Trump how they think they're helping by constantly undermining our only current opposition. Do you really think the White House will be influenced by you? He goes on, just because you believe something to be true, it doesn't mean you have to say it if it isn't helpful. Sometimes the best path in life is to not always announce your truth. Jon Lovett, what do you think? Is it helpful for us to be discussing our truth right now? Or, because it's possible that Joe Biden's just going to ride this out if he thinks it was only strike one, right?
So if Joe Biden ultimately decides not to step aside, that he looks at all of this conversation, he looks at the data, and he makes a decision that as much of a risk as it is to continue, given his liabilities and the way in which he confirmed them with voters, it is even riskier to throw the nomination open or to throw it to Vice President Harris, because the polling does not show that they perform that much better, and better to go into battle with the sure knowledge of your biggest liability rather than finding it out over the next several months. If that happens, I will fight like absolute fucking hell to make sure Joe Biden is the next president. That my concerns about Joe Biden are about his ability to be a messenger and candidate to carry the torch for what we believe are the incredible stakes in this election. Now,
so why not just do that now? Why not just pod save happy talk?
So
Grampy's doing great. He landed that one good line about the handicap, about Trump's handicap, and now he can't carry a bag. That was pretty good.
This is look, this is always the challenge in the run up to an election, talking about a candidate you want to win but have concerns about, right? When are you supposed to be just a team player who parrots what they're saying, and when do you talk openly about your concerns? I think one of the lessons of Trump winning in 2016 is that for fear of hurting the campaign we wanted to win, we weren't honest about our anxieties, and we were too sanguine about the fact that that the Clinton campaign would pull it out. In this case, I think that that debate performance was shocking enough to make us all say, despite the fact that obviously it would be better for Biden, if Biden is the candidate, for us to all be saying it was an anomaly, it wasn't that bad, it's about the policies, not the messenger, it's about the stakes, not the odds, whatever. Obviously I think that would be better. But there are moments where you say, hold on a second, we should be honest about what we saw, because it might be the case that it is worth in this moment to make a change. And the only way we will come to a point where Joe Biden decides to make that change is if people right now are being honest about how they react to the debate and their concerns about the implications for the electorate of what we saw. And we're not the Republicans. We're just not going to pretend we didn't see what we saw with our own eyes. That's not who we are. That's not who we want to be. I don't want to be part of a political movement where you have to pretend that the dear leader is infallible. We have one of those. It absolutely fucking sucks. It destroys. It has destroyed a political movement. It has destroyed a party. It destroys the people and the credibility of the people who are a part of it. And I just don't believe you have to do that in order to be a successful political movement. I just reject the idea that that is what's required.
Just so everybody knows, Lovett had me on Pod Save America during the height of the Gaza protests, and he was like, "Tim, so what do you think about the from the river to the sea chants?" So this whole interrogation section is simply payback for that.
And by the way, Tim, I didn't even know that these are supposed to be hard questions.
You don't feel like this is challenging? You aren't persuaded at all by the notion that like maybe given the stakes, there should be a just propping up Biden Harris and fucking full speed ahead, pedal to the metal. That's not persuasive to you at all.
It's not persuasive to me. I understand it. I'm open to it. I will I'm thinking about it. You know,
Sure.
There's some validity to it, right? Like obviously this conversation, like it would be one thing though if this was a debate about, you know, Joe Biden gave a speech in Milwaukee at a brewery and stumbled a bunch, and then those videos were going viral on TikTok, and then there was a media reaction to it. But the idea that this is some media-driven narrative, I think, is ridiculous when you have roughly 80 million people consuming the debate, whether, you know, on their phones or live, plus all the many millions of video views of the worst moments being shared on TikTok and Instagram and everywhere else. Like the idea that like we shouldn't be talking about this because it lends credence to what people saw with their own eyes, I think is ridiculous in this very specific case. But I think the fact that the debate made people question whether Joe Biden is capable of repairing the damage Joe Biden did means the conversation has to happen. So
yeah, I also don't think it's a close call. I'm obviously playing the devil's advocate because this is like what people are hearing. Like to me, it's insane. I'll listen to the people's feedback on this, but it's insane. I mean, like it's even worse than what you described. Like it wasn't. Not only was it not one bad speech in Milwaukee with some stumbles, it was like the worst thing I've ever watched on live television. I mean, it was horrific. Earlier, you were like, "There's a pit in your stomach." I was like, "There's a pit in my stomach." My entire insides were eating themselves. Like I was sweating, and I couldn't look. Like people, I couldn't watch. So, I mean, like you can't pretend like that didn't happen, and so you have to deal with it. I think the more complicated question is the opposite, right? Do you feel like there should have been a more open conversation about it before, or do you think it was defensible to not have a more open conversation about it before because? Like, frankly, it was a borderline call, and whenever there were big moments, Joe Biden did the job, and so, like, what else were you going to do? Like, what have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, I have. I actually have. I've tried to be honest about it, and I think a few things. First of all, how you just characterized it, I think is exactly right. It was a borderline call. I think the question over the last 2.5 years has been some version of is going into a general with Joe Biden and the risks associated with that greater or lesser than the risks that go with trying to find somebody new. And I truly felt like it was hard to say, just didn't know the answer. And I was also, I think, a bit deferential to Ron Klain said this once, which I think is a very fair way of describing the media and its reaction to Joe Biden, which is don't underestimate how much the media underestimates Joe Biden. And I think that there's some truth to that. I underestimated Joe Biden as a candidate. I underestimated Joe Biden as a president. A lot of people did. And certainly on domestic policy over the last 4 years, it's hard for me to point to a single place where I would say Joe Biden's age, his lower stamina than that of a younger man, prevented success on the legislative front, on the executive front. I think he played his hand.
Maybe on the what about making a case for the successes front?
So
that's part of the job of being president.
Absolutely. But I'm talking about just his successes as a governing president have been extraordinary.
Yep.
That he understood what he could and could not get out of Congress, even when others doubted him. He was able to out-negotiate Kevin McCarthy. He was able to negotiate with Joe Manchin. His persona as a moderate made more progressive policies even you don't like, Tim. that I like, eminently possible.
Yeah.
Like, he did an amazing job, and
It's
he
really
was
nice
came
that now
in
that we
after
know
a
that the
pandemic.
presidents are totally immune, that he used that new tool in his toolbox to only give doctors a get out of jail free card on their med school on their med school loans. I think that was a great use of the one get out of jail free of this new tool that he's got. But anyway,
right.
Continue.
That's a side point, by the way. It is a side point, but I don't understand how the Supreme Court can be like, oh, the president can't regulate pollution, but anything the president does using his authority vested in the Constitution makes him immune from prosecution. So can't he just go do whatever the fuck he wants anyway?
It is confusing. That's maybe a question for Jon Roberts.
Deeply confusing.
We have a request to get Jon Roberts on the podcast. We'll see if he.
Yeah. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. But yes, the biggest liability Joe Biden has been as a messenger, as a speaker, as a persuader. And I think part of why I think this debate is a very good one to be having after that debate performance, and why I'm not persuaded at all by the idea that we should just shut up and get on board, is because what he has to do is persuade people he's up to the job. And just by the fact that he's not been out there the past couple of days tells us that even inside Joe Biden's closest circle, they don't know that he is up to the task of persuading people, that he's up to the job, even if he can successfully do the most important pieces of what it is to be president. And that's just the reality.
All right, I wanted to start going through what the fuck we do then. I was gonna shout out props to Lloyd Doggett. Was gonna play the audio, but you can Google it. Of a congressman out of Austin, was the first guy out on the plank here, asking Joe Biden to step aside. There have been some others, but a little muted from the actual politicians. And we had Jen Psaki, a friend of ours, friend of yours, friend of all the pods. She was on this week over the weekend with Bill Kristol, and like her case was, it's going to be too messy. Doing anything is too messy. It's too complicated. Because of convention stuff and open and so anyway, what do you think about that case? That it is what it is. It was a bad debate, but it's a close run call again. Actually, it's not actually as clear as the bros want to say it is. What do you say to that?
So, I think it is messy. I think it is risky. I don't know what happens. I don't know how well the party coalesces and how quickly. It's never happened, in our lifetimes. Like, I don't know how everyone reacts. It would be history making. It would be surprising. Anyone who could claim to know how it all shakes out, I think, is full of it. So, yeah.
Also, our current path has never happened. I get really frustrated on this point where people are like, the only time we did this was 1968, and look at how that turned out. And I was like, okay, well, like the only time you ran an incumbent president with approval ratings in the 30s, they lost. So look how that turned out. We've never had a incumbent president running who just came off a debate where they demonstrated that they couldn't speak coherently. So that seems like a risky and messy proposition as well.
I mean, I feel like there are people that, given the uncertainty and the anxiety and the legitimate terror they have of Donald Trump being elected, are trying to find purchase. They're like trying to find little islands of confidence on which they can launch their little attacks. Yeah. And sorry, we're all floating in the sea here, all of us. And the one right now we are marching towards defeat. That's what it feels like. Do I think it is possible that Joe Biden can change that? Yes. Does it require Joe Biden being out there in a way he has so far not been willing to be? Yes. Was the debate the moment he was supposed to do that? Yes. But of course it's possible. And if he is the candidate, we will do our best to make it true. But given that.
And I think, by the way, I just want to throw this out there going on, because who knows, Joe Biden might end up making a decision. This is Joe Biden's decision. The one point that the people telling us to shut up have is like, it is Joe Biden's decision, and so it's not really our decision, and maybe us speaking out is unhelpful. I kind of disagree with that, because I think it creates a domino effect where it gives courage to people that maybe have influence with Joe Biden to speak more. But Joe Biden could still win the blue wall. He could still narrowly, but that's probably the ceiling. right? Like a diminished Joe Biden could probably win 270 electoral votes, but that's also it's way better than Trump winning a landslide, which is also possible. But that's a scary outcome, right? This idea that that's not crazy, like Joe Biden by the narrowest margins of our lifetime wins an election where he is in this condition, like the MAGA reaction to that, like we're going head first into a rocky fucking situation, no matter what.
And just like that's the level we're at, right? Like let's all just 8 years ago, the question was, can Donald Trump win? Right. We're going to go into the election 8 years later, and the question will be, can Joe Biden win?
Can he sneak out 270 elections?
In other words, the narrow, yeah. Or just to understand what we're talking about, over 8 years, through 4 years of Donald Trump mishandling a pandemic, being impeached twice, inciting an insurrection, we will have gone from the question being, can Donald Trump win, to can Donald Trump lose? And I just don't believe we should accept, without a big, fulsome, honest conversation, that the best way we want to go into the general election after our party's convention is, can Donald Trump lose? I feel like, shouldn't that tell us something about the need for an honest conversation now before we have reached that point?
I think we can do better than that. Okay. So what's better? The next question is, obviously the vice president is Kamala Harris. Jonathan Last, my colleague, has a newsletter out today that people are sure to be thrilled about, which argues that maybe the best thing to do would be for Joe Biden not just to drop out of the race, but to resign so that Kamala Harris could run as an incumbent and make Donald Trump call her Madam President. I do think that's kind of a juicy proposition. On the other hand, she's not, her number, she's not exactly lighting the world on fire in the polls either. And I think a big part of the reason why we're in this situation is that there's a lot of folks that have doubts about Kamala Harris. The Biden people clearly behind the scenes have attacked her and used like the fact that they don't think that she could do it as a rationale for staying. So like, what do you say about that first step, the Kamala Harris of it all? Do you think that she could do it? And do you think it's worth even talking about other options, or what do you think about that?
So first of all, I find that kind of argument the argument from whoever they may be and who knows how reliable they are, Biden people basically saying, it's a little bit like in Hollywood. You'll see that like some very, very high person inside of a studio will always make the dumbest motherfucker their deputy because that makes them unfireable. Like that's like a joke in Hollywood. Like, oh, right. Like he put so-and-so beneath him so that he never needs to worry about being replaced by the next person.
Yeah.
Like I find that kind of argument pretty insulting, both because Joe Biden chose Kamala Harris. So I don't understand. The argument is that Joe Biden should remain president because on the most important question of who would replace him, he chose someone he doesn't believe in, and therefore you're stuck with him because you'd have to go with this other person, the person he put on the national stage. I just find it to be a very self-serving and circuitous argument. Like, I certainly believe, like if Joe Biden came out to the microphones and said, I've made a decision, as much as I love doing this job, I believe that it's time to pass the torch, and I'm passing the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris. And I urge all of my delegates to support my vice president, and she's the nominee on the first ballot. I'll 100% do I believe that we could rally behind Harris and that she could absolutely win, and I'd be completely fucking ecstatic to do everything we could to elect her. Like, do I believe that's what necessarily has to happen? No, like you could just as easily say Vice President Kamala Harris is an extraordinary politician, and she will be one of the people the delegates will have to choose between. And the delegates will then have a big choice to make, which is, do her strengths and her name recognition and her place in the national stage overcome some of the negatives and baggage associated with incumbency, and put that through its paces. We'll have a race. I don't know which one of those is better, and I can be persuaded either way, to be honest.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing about the we can't switch from Kamala because she's so weak argument. Kamala's already on the fucking ballot because there's an 81-year-old president that like had a total like a freeze on national television for like 15 seconds. So like Kamala's already on the ballot. So if you don't think the people will elect Kamala because the country's too racist or too sexist or because they don't like her or whatever, then that's an argument for quitting the race if you're Joe Biden, not an argument for staying in the race. Because of the situation that Joe Biden has left us in, Kamala is going to be the person that the Republicans run against.
Yeah, and also, by the way, like nobody knows what it looks like to have Kamala Harris step forward in this moment and agree to be the nominee and carry the torch, not just for to be the representative, by the way, in the fight to preserve abortion rights, something that she's been doing across the country already. Like, I think there's like a lot of like, there have been being vice president is a silly job. And there have been a bunch of silly moments, and Kamala Harris has silly moments. And so like, everyone's like, oh, she's silly. It's like, okay. She is a center left, normal Democratic politician who is under the age of 70, which is, it seems to me, what the country is fucking clamoring for. And now, like, does she meet the bill for new and normal? Does the association with the administration become a liability when people, I think, are looking for something new? Maybe not. I don't know the answer to that. But my general sense is, just stepping all the way back, is the country is saying very, very clearly that they are unhappy having to choose between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. They're even more dissatisfied with their options after that debate. The power and appeal of new and normal, whether that's Kamala Harris or someone else, I think would be extraordinary.
I agree with that. By the way, I think everything you said is right. And I think that Kamala clearly is a stronger candidate than the current president because she's capable of waging a strong campaign. And I think that she's a fresh face. And so I think there's that. But go ahead.
Also, like, I feel, I know you feel this too. Like, I felt kind of insane over the last few days, like, especially when people point to like the generic numbers, like, oh, well, a generic Democrat isn't necessarily performing better than Joe Biden, or Kamala Harris doesn't perform better than Joe Biden. And it's like, yeah, right. But there would then be a campaign. Right. There'd be a big political campaign that would take place. And
figurehead could do something with it.
Well, presumably the reason we all pay attention to politics, people raise all this money, they care about the biography and talents of individual campaigns. We have primaries rooted on who would be the most electable and persuasive to a general populace, because we recognize that the act of conducting good old-fashioned politics is not pointless, that it will have an impact and influence on the planet, on the world, on the people, that it actually influences. Like, practicing politics does something, right? So it's like, do I know what happens when J.B. Pritzker or Gavin Newsom or Kamala Harris runs against Donald Trump? No, of course I don't know. But I presume they'll do politics and that'll have some impact on the numbers.
Same. Doing politics would also be a step up for us at the moment. I want to ask this, though. Okay, so we're going through all this. We all would have said this is silly, this is West Wing, this is stupid podcast talk, just don't even think about this. It's not a broker convention, this is absurd. We all have dismissed all this, but we're here now. Like, we are in the most insane, unprecedented situation imaginable, where the America's stupidest man, a reality TV show host who was like criminally indicted 4 separate times and incited an attack on the Capitol of losers carrying his flag, is like right now on a glide path to the presidency again, which he plans to turn into a light autocracy. So that is happening, and the current person running against him is unable to speak. So like, we're in unprecedented times, and so like, shouldn't we at least consider unprecedented options? The thing is, like, I'm all for Kamala if it's Kamala, but like, to stop that crazy motherfucker that we just talked about, you just need to win 3 states Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. 2 of those states have popular governors that just won huge midterm victories, landslides. It's reasonable to believe that they would win easily against Donald Trump in their home states, which means that the 2 of them together, Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer, would have to win one other state. Like, if we're going to be in unprecedented times and pull the emergency alarm to stop Donald Trump and save the country, shouldn't we pull the fucking emergency alarm and pick the best people that we could possibly pick? I say that with love to the vice president.
So I think you have to go even one step further, which you have to say, hey, everybody, forget deciding that it should or shouldn't be Kamala Harris versus Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer, Raphael Warnock, whoever it may be. Don't hide from the responsibility, which is you get to decide if we're going to decide at all. Like, we are not the Democratic Party. We are not 2 kids in a trench coat pretending to be adults. Like, we are going to decide who we send out to represent us. And we can hide from that decision, which is just another way of making the decision and choosing Joe Biden. We can look around and wait for somebody else to be the adult, right? Like, which I think has been a little bit what it's felt like, right? All these politicians and others saying on background to reporters that they want somebody else to step up, but nobody actually coming forward and stepping up. Or we can just be adults, right? Like, we can just take on the responsibility and say, we're going to have this debate and we're going to trust each other and we're going to be honest about the fact that it's risky and messy, but we're not going to shy away from the responsibility. Like, I don't like that. To me is the first step. Like, there's this feeling that somehow, I don't know, maybe it's like a fault of social media and just seeing each other too much and kind of like, nobody is a hero to their valet, right? Like, we all kind of know each other, knowing a little too much about each other, that we kind of look around and say, oh, none of these people are like these are the people who are in charge. They're just regular people. Like, how could they possibly be in charge of such a monumental decision? That's always how it's been, right? Like, that's always how it's been. It's just like the Republicans that decided to, like, Ted Cruz had a moment on the at the convention where he had one moment where he showed some metal and he said everybody should vote their conscience, right? Like, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
That was one moment.
Yeah.
And if more people had been like that, if more people had decided that they were responsible, that they were the adults, that there was no other group of leaders, that history wasn't made of different kinds of people, that they were just people like you. Like, if more people had been like that, maybe we would live in a different world today. Like, there's nobody else coming. Like, it's us. And either we will decide together to just ignore what we saw at the debate and we'll ride with Biden, maybe to victory or to defeat, or we'll coalesce around Kamala Harris because it was a way to avoid a big convention fight, or we'll decide to throw it open. Whatever it will be a decision we collectively made, even though, yes, right now it is up to Joe Biden himself to decide what he does.
Yeah. I think it's just hard to argue. Look at all this is close run call stuff. I think it's hard to argue that opening it up is not the best option. And I think it might be the best option for the vice president, by the way, because I think her going into the nomination, having earned it, having had a forum, having had her first 60 Minutes interview where now she's the president, like the pressure takes a little bit of the air out of the pressure from her a little bit. I don't know. I think it might be the best situation. It seems to me, if we're being grown-ups, if we're looking to Ted Cruz and saying, do what Raphael Cruz did, it seems like that's the thing to do.
Well, I would say I think you are right that if Kamala Harris is the nominee, the best way for her to be the nominee is to have earned it by being part of an open process and winning a vote. That's obviously true to me. Yep. It is not obviously true to me that it is better to have an open convention versus very quickly coalescing around Vice President Harris. I just truly would like to just remain ambivalent about that. and not confident.
Yeah. Okay.
Like in the way that you are, that you bring to everything. That beautiful confidence.
Do I have confidence? Well, here, that's a good transition into our next segment, which I added today just for you. It's a one-time segment.
Okay.
And this segment is called Apology Tour. You might remember your friend Barack Obama became the president. It was a historic moment. The country united around him. We were all happy. And then he immediately traveled the world apologizing for all of America's ills.
Didn't happen.
That inspired the Mitt Romney.
That's a completely inaccurate rendition.
That inspired the Mitt Romney best-selling book, No Apologies, which you may have read or may be sitting somewhere in a basement.
And by the way, hey, do you think it's been good or bad for our society that the Republican Party decided that apologizing is always 100% a sign of weakness? Do you think that maybe that book's title was a hinge point after which Republican politics shifted towards this shameless, ridiculous version of what it means to be strong, which is to never, ever admit that you made a mistake? Do you think that might have been a negative? Or I don't know. What do you think of it? Do you think it was good for our society that now when you make a fake ad of Martin Luther King endorsing you, you apologize, then realize, oops, that was a mistake, and then you embrace it 100%? Do you think having that kind of no apologies politics has been a good thing, Tim?
I'm happy I proposed this segment. I do not think it's been a good thing. I do not.
Okay.
I do not
Great.
also think it was a hinge point of history. And thank God, and thank God for Willard Mitt Romney. We could use a few more people like him right now, though. That was probably a bad call in the book title.
The shaking of Trump's hand.
Yeah, that wasn't. I mean, a lot of things that Mitt Romney could and should apologize for, and he has had some apologies than I have as well. And so, yes, I do bring confidence a lot of times in the moment, which is needed. I think, some people to do something. I think the Democrats could use a little infusion of some people who have a little bit of confidence to try to spur some backbone and like some discussion and bring things out into the open. But that does lead to some downside consequences sometimes, which is what follows next, the apology tour. We're going to start here. Do we need to apologize, yes or no, to Dean Phillips?
Do we need to apologize to Dean Phillips? That's such an important question. But I will tell you, I think the answer is no. But that's because I remember thinking to myself at the time, I want to know that how we talk about Dean Phillips, we will not look back on this and feel any kind of regret. And I think look, what a terrible thing to suggest. It's a bit, what was his name who said to a bunch of reporters, go follow me around, and they followed him around, and then he was on the monkey ship. What's his name? Gary Hart. Yeah. Like, famous last words, but like I believe.
Go listen to my podcast from February, my Dean Phillips segments, and see if there's anything I said that was bad.
See, I think we did, but like I feel like the question we were weighing then is still the same question we're weighing now, which is the risk of Biden and his age greater or worse than the risk of someone new? I just think that debate changed the calculus, right? Like I think it was an open question until Joe Biden, who said after the Hur report, "How can you prove you're up to the job? Watch me." We did. And he didn't pass the test, right? Like the problem with Dean Phillips wasn't that there wasn't validity to what he was saying. It's that A, he wasn't the candidate. And B, no one else emerged to challenge Joe Biden in a serious way. It's a little bit of the problem now, right? Because like to our conversation earlier about like, we're not like, where are the adults that realize that's up to us? Like no one told Barack Obama to challenge Hillary Clinton in 2007, right? He just decided, he looked at the world and said, I can do this, right? He had to decide that.
Right.
And nobody decided they were the right person to challenge Joe Biden, which meant they weren't. It meant they weren't. The right person to challenge Joe Biden was the person who decided it was their time to challenge Joe Biden. There wasn't a challenger. Dean Phillips wasn't the right person. And so we didn't have an alternative. So that's sort of my feeling about it. And by the way, the concerns he raised at the time weren't invalid, and we didn't say they were,
I'm going to disagree. I'm speaking only for myself. I do need to apologize to Dean Phillips. I still don't like that gelato, and I still think the campaign that you ran could have been more positive and focused on how we need generational change rather than pot shots. But that said, I think I was too dismissive of your concerns. I'm sorry, Dean Phillips. Next person. Do we need to apologize to Alex Thompson, Annie Linsky, the Wall Street Journal that did a front page story about Joe Biden, and everyone was like, Rupert Murdoch is gaslighting you? Do we need to apologize to Axios? Is Alex Thompson or the Wall? Oh, were you in Fiji during the Wall Street Journal?
What was? Outrage? Tell me what the story was. Yeah, it
was a front page Wall Street Journal story that said that there were several sources saying that Joe Biden has good days and bad days. The problem was the only on the record sources were Republicans, so everybody did a long segment, including us, saying "fuck you, Wall Street Journal." Like, if you're going to write this story, you need Democratic sources. Alex Thompson has just been covering the Biden bubble aggressively and getting a lot of heat, from liberals. Do we need to apologize to any of the reporters that were trying to write about this?
I think probably.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you think?
I think yes. I think clearly yes. The Wall Street Journal thing. They fucked it up. Like, the Wall Street Journal editors should have made sure that they had at least a stated Democrat on background, or like something like the way that the Wall Street Journal thing went out. And since, you were like grabbing coconuts out of the coconut tree, what's the Kamala line? Mm-hmm. You might not remember, but I do think that there were some legitimate criticisms, but I think there were a lot of pot shots at the Beltway media class for talking about like Joe Biden's light schedule or whatever. And I think the Joe Biden team pushed a lot of those pot shots. And I think probably, the reporters were right. Okay, this one's last one for you, one for me. This is the one for you. Jon Lovett, do you need to apologize to Kamala Harris? Let me read. Crooked Media co-founder and podcast host Jon Lovett attacked Harris for debating Warren over the fate of Trump's Twitter account. Quote, Kamala Harris going after Elizabeth Warren on banning Trump from Twitter is one of the most pathetic stunts I've seen in a debate, Jon Lovett tweeted and later deleted. And then there's this segment from Love It or Leave It. Let's take a listen.
Is the 2024 anxiety getting to you too?
The election? Heck no, John. I'm not worried at all. And it's not just because I ate all the pills, at the bottom of my purse that I thought were loose mini Altoids, but then they were pills.
Really?
Well, they definitely weren't Altoids, okay? Smell?
No, okay. I mean, oh, Jesus. Yeah, no, I don't think it was. I mean, aren't you worried about the election next year?
Oh, no. 2024, it's a piece of cake, John. Piece of funfetti cake, even.
Do you have an apology to Kamala Harris?
So let's take these one at a time. I'll take the second piece first. That's Allison Reese, who does an incredible Kamala Harris, who is delightful every time she's on the show, and I will never apologize for having that amazing performance on Love It or Leave It. Would do again. Will continue to do, especially if Kamala Harris is the nominee. It's so funny.
I googled Jon Lovett apology. Jon Lovett dragged. Jon Lovett I'm sorry, and there was people quote. Sure. Yeah.
Now the K Hive, which I think has mostly removed the hashtag, kind of taken off their uniforms and hidden amongst the civilian population.
Oh no, they're back. They're coming after me this week. The K Hive's been hitting me hard.
But so now they really dislike that tweet from the primaries. My criticism of it, and I think this was and continues to be fair, is that the stakes in the election were so high. Trying to score a point against Elizabeth Warren about calling on Twitter to ban Donald Trump from Twitter, to me felt beneath Kamala Harris, and not a important place to draw a distinction with one of your opponents. And I thought and still think Kamala Harris is a stronger and bigger figure than that. I just didn't like the hit. By the way, I've deleted all my tweets. I've deleted the full archive for the record. And
that's going to lead us to our next item, actually. So do you have to apologize to Kamala Harris or not? No apologies, Jon Lovett, so far. This is great. We've totally flipped roles. You chastised me for being the Republican that won't apologize, and now I've apologized to every person so far. No apologies for you. That's fine. I'm sure.
I would say no. Here's what I will say. That was in a heated moment. I feel like I expressed that very harshly. I'll concede that. I was annoyed because I was like, I think Kamala Harris is better than this, and it just felt like such a stunty moment, and I was bugged by it, and I won't apologize for that, Tim.
Concession accepted. I appreciate your So, you're like, I wonder which of the Romney children are you? Are you Craig or are you Tag?
And by the way,
No
like,
apologies.
I think Donald Trump being off Twitter kind of made like absence make the heart grow fonder. It's like we lack the kind of daily grind of his evil for a long time.
Totally agree with
Anyway.
that. Totally agree with that. Okay, my last one is for me. It's to Politics Girl. Earlier this week, I have all these people that are replying to me with like, that are. I hate the word grifters, so I'm not going to say it. That are influencers, that are that like do videos and TikToks, and they're like, we got to stand by Joe because democracy is on the line and all this stuff, and they're flooding my feed with them. And Tom Nichols on Monday brought up how his wife couldn't even watch the debate, and that jogged a memory in my mind that one of the people sending me videos had said the same thing, that they didn't even watch the debate, but it doesn't matter. And it turns out like the video is much more nuanced than that, and I wasn't as familiar with the OOV as I should have been. And I am Politics Girl. I appreciate you. She's been out there doing the good work. I shouldn't have called you a grifting influencer. That is not true. I apologize. That ends the segment apology tour. I'm sorry, Politics Girl. Okay, we're skipping the right stuff. We're out of time. We'll do me and Jon Lovett will do a whole YouTube on the right stuff another day. If our democracy survives. Quick mailbag, and then you're gonna end us with something uplifting. Mailbag for John. David, how did you know when you should log off and take a break from Twitter? Because that is a lesson I need to learn, apparently, given what's happening to me on X.com this week. But I can't stop looking at it. So how did you do it? How did you know when you should log off?
So it's not when you know you need to log off. It's when you've logged off for a while and realize how much better it is to not be logged on. Like, for me, actually, by the way, like I feel like log off from log on is not the issue. Here's what I would say. Just take it off your phone. I really am increasingly feeling like it's not about the platforms or the algorithms. It's the access point. Twitter is a fine device on your desktop. It lives on your desktop, and it's a screaming void that only exists when you're at your work machine. But then when you're in your life in the world and you have your phone is for texting and maps. Just get this stuff off. Get this stuff out of your brain in the little kind of liminals, the little moments of life when you're just out in the world. That's when I think Twitter does its most damage, because like you're in life, and then all of a sudden you're back into this fucking box of screams, and you're out and you're back in life. And then it's like dipping into a horror movie. You're in a romantic comedy,
of screams,
and then just,
is that what you called it?
Yeah. Yes. You're in a romantic comedy, and then your phone is a horror movie. Like you don't need that. That's my feeling.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to do it this week or until we have a nominee. I can't. I can't think about anything else. I can't talk about anything else. I need the box of screams because I'm screaming. Unfortunately, a lot of people are screaming at me this week. So there's that. So I probably should log off. I know I should, but I can't.
Like,
I don't know how, and I can't. But I'm gonna.
Who is screaming at you? Who cares? Who cares?
It's a good point.
Like, just don't like. It's also just like. Going back into it, like I've just been back on it this week, and it's just like, it's so bad for your brain that to see one good thought, you have to see 8 bad thoughts.
Yeah.
Right or wrong, just poorly expressed bad thoughts, just mediocre, poorly described feelings.
I'm not going to re-listen to my Dean Phillips interview, but I'm going to re-listen to this advice from Jon Lovett, which I think is sage, once we're through this crisis, because I think I would be lying to myself if I thought that I could get off now. Okay, Deb, it's a question for me, but I'm interested in your take as well, John. When you were an operative in the Republican Party, that's to Tim, did you also hear about orgies and tons of drugs like Madison Cawthorn mentioned? And so I have that question for you as well in the Democratic Party. I've heard about things in D.C. I've heard that people occasionally do drugs and occasionally have group sexual encounters. I don't think that it was Madison Cawthorn having it with, I don't know, Paul Ryan or Lindsey Graham or, I don't know, Tim Scott or anybody else. I don't think that was happening. I have a sense that Madison Cawthorn might know a little thing about drugs and orgies. That's just a sense that I have. And so I think he might have been expressing an experience that he had in Washington, but I think unlikely with other Republican congresspeople. But you actually worked in government. unlike me, because all my candidates
Mhm.
lost. So what do you think? Orgies and drug parties in DC, is that something that you saw a lot of?
Here's how I feel about this. I feel so profoundly left out. Like, I feel like maybe they were happening, maybe they weren't, but I just wasn't getting the nod. You know what I mean? Like, I always feel like I have felt from the time I first realized I was a gay person that like the super fun version of being gay, the parties and the
circuit
the whole thing,
parties and the bubbles and people,
all of that was like I don't know, like a neighborhood away from me.
Just out of
Like,
your
I just was
grasp.
never,
It was just out of your grasp.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like if it were happening, if it weren't happening, I just have I lived in DC for what, like almost a decade. Nobody ever offered me cocaine even one time. Not one time. I just don't think people look at me and think this is a person.
I was digging through the dregs of the mailbox. I got that question like 3 months ago, but I've been waiting for the right person to get a feedback on it. And that was exactly the answer I was looking for. Okay. Lastly, you have this book. Everyone should buy it. We do need to know. We get this question about all the time. What can we do? What can I do? How to Save America in 10 Easy Steps. So tell us. I want you to tell us, what do we do about despair? What do we do if you're just a regular listener and you want to help democracy? Like, give us some advice. Let's just do it. Like, what are some steps?
The first thing I would say is, no matter where you are, no matter what is happening, there is an election near you where you could literally be the difference between winning and losing. And the reality is, the closer it is to you, the less attention it will get and the more of an impact it will have on your community. I was in North Carolina last weekend. We were knocking on doors for candidates running for state legislature. In North Carolina, one person switched parties, and it gave the Republicans a supermajority in the legislature. That gave them the ability to pass a draconian abortion ban. That gave them the ability to overcome a Democratic veto from the governor to pass a bill that allowed education funding to go to some of the most extreme religious figures in the state. Some of those districts have been gerrymandered. These are people running in seats that will be decided by 200, 300, 400 people. The number of doors you could personally knock on and talk to people about these races. And what the book is about, and it's actually funny, please check it out. We really tried to make something that was entertaining and silly and joyful because we know how much of a slog politics feels like right now. But like, the reality is that being a part of politics, especially off of your phone and in the world, it's obviously a good thing to do for society, but like, you will enjoy it. It will make you a happier person. Like, there are a lot of people that want you to be cynical about politics. If you step outside of that kind of noisy, cynical space and just get involved at the local level, just do it one Sunday in the next couple of weeks, you will be happier for it.
I totally agree.
And also buy the book.
But meeting other people is important. We did this what I'm about to say isn't saving democracy, but it's related to what you're saying, which is we had our live event in Denver. We had a little gathering afterwards, and like a bunch of people that used to be Republicans or were center left Democrats or whatever, or just think we're funny or whatever, like came. Some flew from other places, and you could just sense in the group that it was booing. It was booing for me. And so like going back to the box of yells, like that is not booing. It is the opposite. And, even if it does not make the difference between winning or losing, just as a personal matter of feeling good, of feeling energized, of feeling like you're doing something that has purpose, like going out and actually seeing other humans. Other humans are mostly great. Other humans are mostly great when you don't have to hear every single thought of theirs, like on the internet. Like being around them is a positive, and community building is a positive. And I think, so I agree with you 100% on that. People should buy the book, Democracy or Else: How to Save America in 10 Easy Steps. We're going to need it, John. We're going to need it. And I failed my job. We had a lot of funny Republicans to make fun of, but like saving democracy right now does require a little bit of a convo among our little coalition here, our little unwieldy coalition. So I think we had to focus on that today. And we can tomahawk dunk on Republicans together another time.
I would love to. Nothing would make me happier.
All right, that sounds good. Thank you to Jon Lovett. Everybody have a great Independence Day. Got a special show for you tomorrow, so come back and check it out. And we will see y'all then. Peace.